Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Seraphine Rowenfall knelt on the cold stone floor as her parents signed the final page of the contract that sold her to strangers, her hands trembling so hard she could barely keep them pressed together. The lantern light flickered across her mother's face, revealing not sorrow but relief, as though ridding themselves of her had lifted a weight they'd carried too long. Outside, the wind howled against the wooden walls of the trading lodge, rattling every beam like a warning no one wanted to hear. Seraphine tasted dust on her tongue, thick and bitter, as Torvin pushed her forward toward the cloaked buyer waiting in the shadows. He didn't look at her. Neither of them did. To them, she was no longer a daughter, only a burden they claimed could never give them lineage, a barren branch on a family tree they guarded with pride. Shame steamed behind her eyes, hot and blinding, but she swallowed it to keep from shattering completely. The buyer's hand closed around her arm, cold and gloved, pulling her away from the only home she had ever known. In that moment, Seraphine realized they had never truly loved her at all. She felt utterly forsaken. Rain began to drum against the lodge roof as Seraphine was led outside, each cold drop splattering on her skin like tiny slaps, reminding her she was no longer free to choose her own path. The cloaked buyer marched her toward a black wagon hitched to two restless horses, their breath rising in pale clouds under the moon's muted glow. Mud squelched beneath her boots, soaking through the seams until her toes numbed, but she kept walking, afraid that stopping might provoke something worse. She caught a glimpse of Marwan watching from the doorway, arms crossed, expression carved from stone, as though this night meant nothing more than a task finally complete. Seraphine wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask how her own mother could sell her like unwanted livestock, but the words tangled in her throat, trapped behind a lifetime of silence. As the horses jerked forward, she felt the wagon lurch and the forest swallowed them in darkness. Yet beneath the fear twisting in her chest, something strange stirred. A whisper of fate, thin but persistent, as though the night itself held its breath for her. She didn't know why, but she sensed her story was only beginning. Moments later, the wagon jolted to a halt, throwing Seraphine forward as shouts echoed through the trees. Deep, commanding voices that did not belong to simple traders. The cloaked buyer stiffened, his grip tightening painfully around her wrist before he stepped down to confront the intruders. Seraphine peeked through the slats and saw figures emerging from the mist, armored in dark leathers marked with silver sigils she had only heard whispered about during late-night village tales. The emblem of the silver-fanged dominion gleamed on their shoulders. Her breath hitched. No one ever crossed paths with the Alpha King's men and continued life unchanged. A tall warrior approached the wagon, his eyes glowing faintly amber with wolf light as he inspected her, his expression unreadable. "This one," he said, voice like gravel breaking. "The king has called for her." The buyer protested, insisting she had already been purchased, but the warrior silenced him with a low growl that vibrated through the ground itself. The air thickened, humming with danger and destiny. Seraphine's pulse pounded so loudly she could barely hear the forest anymore. Why would the Alpha King, feared by all, choose someone like her, a girl her parents believed worthless? She trembled now. As Seraphine was lifted from the wagon, the forest seemed to hold its breath, leaves shimmering in the cold air as though touched by unseen power. The warrior who had spoken earlier stepped closer, his amber eyes softening when he noticed the raw marks on her wrist. Without a word, he removed his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders, its heavy, fur-lined fabric instantly warming her trembling body. The buyer sputtered angry protests, but no one listened. The Silverfang warriors commanded authority that no common trader dared challenge. A horn sounded in the distance, low and haunting, and the warrior nodded at his men before guiding Seraphine down a narrow path lit only by moonlight. She tried to speak, to ask why the king wanted her, yet her voice cracked before the words formed. The warrior glanced at her, sensing her fear, and murmured, "You'll understand soon." His tone held neither cruelty nor pity, only certainty. With each step, the night grew brighter, as though the moon itself leaned closer to witness her fate. For the first time, Seraphine felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar. Not hope, but the fragile possibility of being chosen for more than her suffering today. Minutes later, the trees parted, revealing a clearing washed in silver light, where a massive black stallion waited, its breath spiraling like smoke. The warrior helped Seraphine mount before climbing behind her, his presence steady and unthreatening as he signaled the others. Hooves thundered across the forest floor, sending leaves flying as they rode toward a distant ridge, glowing faintly against the night. Seraphine clutched the cloak tighter, the fabric smelling of pine and steel, grounding her as fear and confusion tangled inside her chest. She had been sold as worthless only moments ago, yet now she was being rushed toward the Alpha King himself, a man whispered to be both protector and destroyer. Her thoughts spun like sparks in a storm. What if he wanted her for something darker than her parents had? The warrior's voice broke through her spiraling dread. "Seraphine," he said softly, surprising her. "The king does not summon without purpose." The wind whipped her hair as the stallion charged up the ridge, and when they reached the crest, she gasped. Below lay the Silver Fang fortress, its towers rising like obsidian claws against the sky. Somewhere inside waited the Alpha King, and a destiny she never imagined. Dawn crept slowly across the Silver Fang fortress, casting pale gold light over the stone walls as Seraphine was led through an arched entrance guarded by towering warriors. The courtyard buzzed with quiet murmurs as soldiers paused mid-training to watch her pass, their expressions unreadable. She clutched the cloak around her shoulders, feeling small beneath their scrutiny. But the warrior guiding her, Thorn Veilheart, commander of the royal guard, walked with steady purpose, shielding her from wandering stares. The fortress smelled of pine resin, steel, and distant hearth fire, a scent so different from her village that it made her chest ache. As they crossed the courtyard, Seraphine noticed how every movement around her was precise, disciplined, as though the entire place breathed in perfect rhythm under one will. Thorn led her to a stone stairway spiraling upward toward a balcony overlooking the valley. Her heart hammered with each step, knowing whom she was about to meet. At the top, the wind stirred, carrying a faint echo of a howl from the mountains beyond. Thorn halted beside a set of iron doors carved with silver wolves. "The king awaits," he said solemnly. Seraphine swallowed hard. Whatever fate had plucked her from the darkness was waiting behind those doors. The iron doors parted with a slow groan, revealing a vast chamber bathed in soft morning light filtering through high windows. Shadows stretched across the floor like silent watchers as Seraphine stepped inside. Her gaze traveled upward to a raised platform where a tall figure stood, with his back turned, gazing out across the valley. His presence alone filled the room, dominating the air with an intensity that made her breath catch. Broad shoulders, dark hair falling past his collar, and a stillness that felt more dangerous than movement. Aldrich Stormborn, Alpha King of the Silver Fang Dominion. Thorn bowed deeply before stepping aside, leaving Seraphine standing alone in the center of the chamber. Aldrich did not turn immediately. Instead, he spoke in a voice deep enough to vibrate through the stone beneath her feet. "You are Seraphine Rowanfall." It wasn't a question. Her mouth went dry. "Yes, Your Majesty?" At that, he finally turned. His eyes, silver, sharp, and ancient in their knowing, met hers with a force that rooted her in place. It felt as though he saw everything she wished to hide. Her fear, her shame, her abandonment, and something else, something she didn't understand. Aldrich descended the steps with a slow, deliberate grace, each movement precise like a predator deciding whether to strike or spare. Seraphine lowered her gaze instinctively, but he stopped in front of her, closer than she expected, and tilted her chin upward with a single gloved finger. His touch was firm, but not cruel. "Who told you that you were barren?" he asked quietly, the question slicing through her like a blade. Seraphine's breath stalled. No one here knew of her parents' reason for selling her, or so she thought. "My parents," she whispered. "They said I was unable to give them children." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Aldrich's eyes flickered with something dark, something deadly. Yet it wasn't aimed at her. "They lied," he said. The words hit her like thunder. Seraphine blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "Lied?" Aldrich nodded once, jaw tightening. "You were sold under false shame. And now the truth will come to light." Before she could respond, the chamber doors slammed open as Valara Nightcrest, his beta, strode in, her expression sharp with urgency. She bowed briefly, then spoke. "Your Majesty, the Oracle has arrived. She claims the girl must be tested, immediately." Seraphine's pulse raced. Tested for what? Seraphine followed Aldrich and Valara down a torchlit corridor leading deep beneath the fortress, the walls narrowing into ancient stone carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The air grew cooler with every step, carrying a metallic scent that hinted at old magic and older secrets. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as they approached a circular chamber illuminated by blue fire burning in suspended lanterns. At its center stood a cloaked figure draped in silver-threaded robes, the moonbound Oracle. Her face was hidden beneath a veil that shimmered like mist, but Seraphine felt the weight of her gaze the moment she entered. Aldrich motioned Seraphine to stand within a ring of pale runes etched into the floor. The Oracle raised both hands, and the air trembled. "Child of Rowanfall," the Oracle intoned, her voice layered like many speaking at once. "You have been told a false fate. Tonight, truth is demanded." Seraphine's stomach twisted as tendrils of light spiraled upward, wrapping gently around her wrists, her throat, her chest. They didn't burn, but they probed, searching, uncovering. Aldrich stood rigid, silver eyes fixed on her with fierce intensity. Seraphine closed her eyes, afraid of what the light might reveal, afraid of what it might confirm. Suddenly, the chamber erupted in a shockwave of radiance that lifted Seraphine off her feet, her hair billowing around her like a crimson flame. A low gasp escaped the Oracle as the runes beneath her ignited, with blinding brilliance, casting wild shadows across the walls. Seraphine's body trembled violently, but she felt no pain, only a growing warmth spreading from her heart outward, pulsing in rhythm with something ancient and powerful. When the light finally dimmed, she collapsed to her knees, breathless and shaking. The Oracle steadied herself against a pillar, her voice trembling for the first time. "Aldrich, she bears the mark." Valara's eyes widened. Aldrich stepped forward, his silver gaze burning with realization and awe. "The moonborn lineage," he murmured. The Oracle nodded weakly. "She is not barren. She is a vessel of rare lineage, one capable of carrying the next alpha heir." Seraphine froze, the words hammering through her chest. Not barren, not broken. Her parents had thrown her away for nothing. As the truth settled like a storm, Aldrich crouched beside her, his voice softer than she expected. "Seraphine," he said, "your life will never be the same. And those who cast you aside will soon learn the cost of their lies." Seraphine barely slept. Long after the Oracle's revelation, she lay in a guest chamber overlooking the moonlit valley, her mind a whirl of disbelief and rising dread. The fortress felt too large, too alive, as if every stone held a secret she wasn't ready to hear. Yet beneath her confusion pulsed something deeper, a spark of worth she had never felt before. As dawn painted the sky in streaks of rose and gold, a soft knock sounded at her door. Nira Lewin, a palace attendant with gentle hazel eyes, stepped inside carrying a folded cloak and a basin of warm water. "His Majesty requests your presence in the eastern courtyard," she said, her voice kind but tinged with urgency. Seraphine's pulse quickened. "Why?" Nira's gaze softened. "Because the truth about you, it changes everything. And the king must decide your path before others try to decide it for you." Her words sent a chill down Seraphine's spine. As she washed and dressed, her hands trembled. In her village, she had been ignored, dismissed, sold. Now powerful people whispered about her destiny. When Nira guided her through the winding corridors, Seraphine could feel eyes on her, curious, cautious, calculating. Change was coming fast. The eastern courtyard opened before Seraphine like a world of its own. Wide training grounds surrounded by towering pine trees, whose needles whispered in the wind. Warriors sparred in practiced movements, their blades catching the morning sun in sharp flashes. When they noticed her arrival, their strikes faltered for a heartbeat, enough to tell her she had become someone worth noticing, even if she didn't understand why. Aldrich stood at the far end of the courtyard, speaking quietly with Violara and Thorn. His presence commanded the space, even without effort. The air around him seemed thicker, charged. As Seraphine approached, her steps slowed. She still didn't know how to act around an Alpha King, let alone one who believed she carried a lineage thought lost to legend. Aldrich turned, his silver eyes meeting hers with an intensity that punched breath from her lungs. But there was something different in his gaze today. Not just authority, but protectiveness edged with caution. "Seraphine," he began, voice steady, "there is something you must see." Violara motioned her forward toward a circular platform carved with ancient symbols. Seraphine hesitated before stepping onto it, feeling a faint thrum beneath her feet, like a heartbeat older than time. As soon as she stood upon the carved platform, Aldrich signaled to Thorn, who withdrew a scroll marked with 3 interlocking moons, the crest of the moonborn lineage. Seraphine's breath caught. She had seen that crest only once before, buried in the corner of an old storybook her mother used to hide whenever guests arrived. Aldrich nodded at Thorn, who opened the scroll with reverent care, revealing an intricate illustration of a woman whose features mirrored Seraphine's so closely she felt the world tilt beneath her. Same red hair, same sharp jawline, same quiet fire in the eyes. "This," Aldrich said softly, "is Alohan's Starcrest, the last known moonborn before the lineage vanished." Seraphine tore her gaze from the scroll, confusion rising like a tide. "But how is this possible?" Aldrich stepped closer, his expression grave. "Because you are her descendant. Her blood flows in you. And those with moonborn blood do not wither. They awaken." His words crashed over her, overwhelming and impossible. She shook her head, stepping back. "My parents said I was broken." Aldrich's voice hardened. "They feared what they didn't understand." Before Seraphine could respond, a horn sounded in the distance, sharp, urgent, and unmistakable. The courtyard shifted instantly as warriors froze mid-strike, heads snapping toward the distant watchtowers. Another horn blast followed, deeper and more urgent than the first, an alarm that spoke of danger already closing in. Aldrich's expression darkened, his posture sharpening like a blade pulled from its sheath. Violara pressed 2 fingers to the ground, sensing tremors only werewolves could detect. "They're approaching from the northern ridge," she said tensely. Thorn stepped beside Aldrich. "Your Majesty, should we secure the girl?" The words struck Seraphine like a physical blow. She hated being spoken of as a possession, but the fear in Thorn's voice made her stomach twist. Aldrich shook his head. "No. Whoever comes seeks her specifically. Hiding her will only embolden them. His gaze snapped to Seraphine, fierce and unwavering. "Stay behind me. Do not run." She swallowed hard, nodding despite the tremor in her legs. The ground rumbled faintly as shadows flickered beyond the trees. A gust of icy wind tore through the courtyard, scattering leaves in swirling spirals, carrying with it a scent Seraphine didn't recognize. Ash, iron, and something snarling beneath the surface. Vilara's lips tightened. Garrick Emberholt. A rival alpha. A threat. And he was coming for Seraphine. Moments later, a figure emerged from the icy Kihas. Treeline. Tall, broad-shouldered, armored in dark furs that seemed to swallow the light around him. Garrick Emberholt's eyes burned amber gold, wilder and more feral than any wolf Seraphine had ever imagined. Behind him, his warriors fanned out like shadows made flesh. "Stormborn!" Garrick roared, his voice shaking the very air. "You have something that belongs to me." Seraphine flinched as his gaze landed on her, hungry and triumphant, as though he'd already claimed her fate. Aldrich stepped forward, blocking her from view with a stance carved from pure authority. "She was sold unlawfully," Aldrich said, voice like steel drawn across stone, "and the moonbound oracle has declared her under Silverfang protection." Garrick sneered. "I don't care for your decrees or your dying traditions. The girl carries power. Power my lineage will claim." Seraphine's blood iced. This was never about her infertility. This was about the power she didn't know she possessed. Garrick advanced another step, and something inside Seraphine snapped awake. Heat surged through her veins, bright and fierce. As the two alphas faced off, the air shimmered around her, the rising pulse of a destiny she could no longer escape. Chaos erupted the moment Garrick stepped closer, the air between the rival alphas crackling like a storm ready to split the earth. Seraphine felt the heat inside her spike sharply, spreading through her veins until her fingertips tingled with a strange, luminous warmth. Warriors from both sides fanned out across the courtyard, their boots digging into the stone as tension thickened. Aldrich positioned himself slightly ahead of her, shoulders squared, jaw set, his presence radiating dominance powerful enough to make the ground seem to bow beneath him. Garrick's voice ripped through the air. "Move aside, Stormborn, unless you wish to lose more than your pride today." Aldrich didn't flinch. "You enter my territory, threaten my people, and expect surrender? Leave now and live." Garrick snarled, shifting dangerously, his eyes flickering with a feral gleam. The wind whipped around them, scattering pine needles and dust as if the forest itself recoiled. Seraphine's breath quickened. She sensed something building, something inside her responding to the danger like a spark begging for flame. Vilara's whisper brushed her ear, urgent and low. "Whatever you feel rising, don't fight it. It may be the only thing keeping you alive in this terrible moment of reckoning." Seraphine's pulse thundered as Garrick lunged suddenly, claws half-formed, aiming not for Aldrich, but for her. Aldrich moved faster than thought, intercepting him with a roar that shook the courtyard to its roots. The clash of their power sent shockwaves rippling through the air, forcing nearby warriors to stagger back. Seraphine stumbled as the platform beneath her vibrated, glowing faintly with the same ancient runes she had stepped on earlier that morning. Energy coiled around her ankles like living threads, reacting to the rising storm between the alphas. Vilara grabbed her arm, steadying her. "You cannot stay here," she hissed. "If Garrick reaches you, everything the Oracle revealed will be lost." Seraphine wanted to move, but her legs felt anchored by fear, by the overwhelming sense that something irreversible was unfolding. Aldrich forced Garrick backward with a brutal strike, but the rival alpha only laughed, blood dripping from his lip. "You can't protect her forever," Garrick growled. "When her power fully awakens, she will belong to the strongest. And that will not be you." Aldrich's snarl was pure fury, but Seraphine hardly heard him. The runes beneath her were glowing brighter, pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat right now. A sudden cracking sound split the air as the platform beneath Seraphine flared with blinding silver light, shooting a pillar of radiance straight into the sky. Everyone froze, including Garrick. The force lifted Seraphine off her feet, suspending her weightless above the glowing runes as her hair billowed like wildfire around her. She wanted to scream, but the sound died in her throat as visions flooded her mind. A woman with her same red hair standing on a cliff beneath 3 moons. A newborn wrapped in silver cloth. A wolf with eyes like starlight bowing before her. The images vanished as quickly as they came, leaving her breathless. Aldrich shouted her name, but she couldn't answer. Her entire body pulsed with warmth that felt neither human nor wolf, but something older, deeper, claiming her from the inside. When the light finally dimmed, Seraphine crashed to her knees, gasping. Garrick stared at her with raw hunger. "It has begun," he whispered. Aldrich stepped in front of her, protective and unyielding. "You will not touch her." Garrick smirked. "We shall see, Stormborn. Fate favors the bold." Then, with a violent swirl of black mist, he and his warriors vanished into the forest shadows. The courtyard fell eerily silent once Garrick vanished, as though the world itself paused to recalibrate after witnessing something forbidden. Seraphine struggled to catch her breath, her body trembling from the lingering shock of the awakening she didn't understand. Aldrich knelt beside her, his expression tight with concern, though his voice remained steady. "Seraphine, look at me." She forced her gaze upward, meeting eyes that flickered silver in the fading glow of the runes. "What you saw, what you felt, none of it is your fault. Your lineage has been dormant for generations. Awakening like this was inevitable." She shook her head weakly. "I don't want to be part of a war between alphas. I didn't ask for any of this." Valara approached, kneeling on Seraphine's other side. "None of us choose the blood we're born into, but we can choose how to carry it," she said gently. "Right now, we must move." "You somewhere Garrick cannot reach." Thorn nodded gravely. "The northern outpost is too exposed. The safest place is the Moon Cradle Sanctum." Aldrich's jaw tightened, as though the name itself carried weight. "Prepare the escort," he ordered. "We leave before sundown." Seraphine's heart thudded. Another journey, another unknown. As the warriors dispersed to make preparations, Aldrich helped Seraphine stand. Her legs trembled beneath her, but the warmth inside her had faded into a faint hum, like a sleeping ember waiting to ignite again. He kept one hand lightly on her arm, guiding her toward the inner halls as Nera hurried to meet them. The fortress felt different now. Every shadow seemed deeper, every echo sharper, as though danger lurked behind each stone. "The Moon Cradle Sanctum," Seraphine murmured. "What is it?" Aldrich slowed, his expression softening in a way she hadn't expected. "A place built by your ancestors," he said. "A sanctuary for those born of the Moonborn line. It's the only place powerful enough to shield you from Garrick's influence, and from your own awakening until you learn to control it." The words struck her with equal parts fear and wonder. She barely understood herself anymore, let alone the legacy she carried. As they reached the stairway, Aldrich paused, his gaze locking with hers. "You are not alone in this, Seraphine. I will protect you, even if the cost is blood." The vow hung between them, fierce and unbreakable. And in that moment, for the first time, she believed him. By late afternoon, the fortress buzzed with restless tension as preparations for departure swept through the halls. Seraphine stood at her chamber window, watching the Silverfang warriors load supplies onto sleek black horses bred for both speed and silence. Every passing moment made the air feel heavier, as though the shadows lengthened in anticipation of what lay ahead. Naira helped her fasten a cloak of deep forest green over her shoulders, the fabric soft but sturdy, woven to endure harsh winds. "The moon cradle sanctum is far," Naira said softly, "and the path is not kind, especially to those unaccustomed to its trials." Seraphine swallowed, unsure whether the tremor in her chest came from fear or the lingering echo of the awakening that had electrified her hours before. She wasn't the same girl who had been dragged through the forest in chains, but she wasn't someone strong or fearless either, at least not yet. When Nira squeezed her shoulders reassuringly, Seraphine managed a small, grateful smile. "Will Aldrich truly be able to keep me safe?" she asked. Naira hesitated only a moment before nodding. "If anyone can withstand Garrick Emberholt, it is him." Still, uncertainty prickled Seraphine's mind like thorns she couldn't ignore. When Seraphine descended to the courtyard, Aldrich was already mounted atop a towering, midnight-colored stallion, the horse's mane whipping in the gathering breeze. His presence drew every eye. Even among warriors, he was unmistakably dominant, a force bound in flesh and will. Valara rode at his side, her posture sharp and alert, scanning the tree line as though danger lurked just out of sight. Thorn approached Seraphine with a steady hand, helping her mount a smaller but swift mare. "Stay close to us," he said. "No matter what happens, do not break formation." She nodded, gripping the reins tightly as her heart pounded in her ears. The moment Aldrich raised his hand, the gates groaned open, revealing the winding path that cut through the dense Silverfang forest. Cold wind swept into the courtyard, carrying the scent of pine, moss, and something faintly metallic. Seraphine tried to steady her breathing, but the memory of Garrick's predatory gaze clawed at her nerves. As the group began moving, horses thundering across the earth, she glanced once over her shoulder. The fortress shrank behind them, swallowed by trees. Ahead lay the unknown, and whatever truth waited to reshape her destiny. The forest grew darker as they rode deeper, the canopy thickening overhead until the sunlight dwindled to scattered shafts of muted gold. Strange sounds echoed between the trees. Distant howls, rustling leaves, the occasional snap of unseen branches. Seraphine had grown up surrounded by woods, but these felt different. Older, watchful, alive with ancient memories that brushed her skin like invisible fingertips. Aldrich occasionally glanced back at her, as if ensuring she hadn't disappeared into the shadows that swallowed their path. Each look steadied her pulse in ways she didn't understand. After nearly an hour, Valara raised a fist, signaling the group to slow. Whispering winds carried a warning only wolves could detect. "Something is wrong," she murmured. Thorn's hand drifted toward his blade, eyes scanning the gloom. Seraphine swallowed hard, sensing a pressure in the air, a thick, pulsing heaviness that reminded her of the moment before her awakening. Aldrich dismounted, motioning her to stay put as he approached a bend in the trail. "Be ready," he warned. The forest fell silent, utterly silent. Then a chill slithered over Seraphine's skin as she realized something was watching them from beyond the trees, something that didn't belong to either Alpha's pack. A sudden rustle tore through the stillness, followed by a guttural hiss that made Seraphine's blood run cold. Before Aldrich could react, a massive shadow lunged from the undergrowth, crashing into the path with bone-rattling force. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't even fully human. The creature stood on twisted limbs, its skin pale and stretched thin across a skeletal frame, eyes glowing with sickly green fire. Valara cursed under her breath. "A hollowborn," she spat. "Garrick's doing." Before Seraphine could ask what that meant, the beast lunged again, this time straight toward her. The mare reared, wildly, nearly unseating her. But Aldrich was faster than thought. He tackled the hollowborn midair, slamming it into a tree with brutal strength. The impact shook leaves loose in a shower of dust and sap. Thorn and Vylara joined the fight, blades flashing in the dim light. Seraphine gripped the saddle, heart hammering against her ribs, feeling utterly useless as the warriors battled the creature with coordinated deadly force. But the Hollowborn didn't bleed. Its wounds healed instantly, sealing with black smoke. "They don't stop unless you burn the heart," Vylara shouted. Aldrich snarled, "Keep Seraphine away!" But Seraphine felt a pull, deep, instinctive, undeniable. The same heat that had awakened inside her earlier surged again, burning through her veins with fierce intensity. Her vision shimmered, edges glowing with silver light. The Hollowborn jerked free of Aldrich's grip and hurled itself toward Thorn, who struggled to regain footing. Without thinking, Seraphine dismounted and stepped forward, raising her hands as the strange warmth rushed to her fingertips. A luminous wave of silvery fire burst from her palms, striking the creature square in the chest. The impact sent it skidding backward, screeching as the flame clung to its flesh like living moonlight. Aldrich froze mid-strike, eyes wide as the fire spiraled into the Hollowborn's chest, piercing through bone to ignite its twisted heart. A final shriek ripped through the woods before the creature collapsed, dissolving into ash that scattered across the forest floor. Seraphine staggered, trembling, her breath shallow and unsteady. Aldrich reached her in seconds, gripping her shoulders. His voice was low, reverent, shaken. "Seraphine, do you understand what you just did?" She shook her head, tears welling. "I don't know how. I just reacted." Aldrich's silver gaze burned with awe and fear. The moonborn fire has awakened, and now every alpha in the realm will know it. Night had fallen by the time the group reached the ridge overlooking the valley, the moon rising pale and swollen above the treetops. The air was sharp with cold, carrying the metallic tang of distant storms. After the attack, no one spoke for a long while. The forest itself seemed to mourn in heavy silence. Seraphine rode beside Aldrich now, her fingers still tingling with the memory of the silver fire that had burst from her hands. She couldn't decide whether the sensation terrified or comforted her. Aldrich kept glancing her way, as though confirming she hadn't vanished or shattered. "The Hollowborn was hunting you," he finally said, breaking the quiet. "Not us." Seraphine swallowed. "So Garrick knows I awakened." Aldrich nodded, jaw tightening. "He felt it the moment you released that power. Any alpha would." His words made her skin crawl. She wasn't ready for this. Any of it. "What if it happens again?" she whispered. Aldrich slowed his horse slightly, positioning himself closer. "Then I'll be there to guide you." His voice held quiet certainty that steadied her trembling breath. Ahead, Vylara raised a torch, illuminating a narrow trail snaking down the ridge. "We make for the sanctum now, no stopping until dawn." The descent was treacherous. Loose stones shifted beneath the horse's hooves, and cold mist curled between the rocks in ghostly trails. Seraphine had to grip the saddle tightly to keep her balance, her mare snorting nervously each time the path narrowed to a ledge barely wide enough for them both. Vylara rode ahead, scanning every shadow, every sudden whisper of wind. Thorn stayed close behind Seraphine, his presence steady and protective. Despite their vigilance, Seraphine couldn't shake the sensation that invisible eyes tracked their movements from the darkness below. Aldrich's voice reached her through the gloom. "The Mooncradle Sanctum lies deep within the valley. No one but Silverfang blood or Moonborn lineage can pass its wards." Seraphine tightened her grip on the reins. "What if it rejects me?" Aldrich turned, silver eyes gleaming faintly. "It won't. It already recognized you when the runes flared." Another weight settled in her chest, a weight made of destiny, fear, and reluctant acceptance. She had spent her entire life believing she was broken. Yet now she was being carried toward a sanctuary built for a lineage she hadn't known she belonged to until yesterday. Nothing in her world made sense anymore. Hours passed before the valley opened wide, revealing a breathtaking sight that stole Seraphine's breath. At its center rose the Moon Cradle Sanctum, a towering structure carved into a cliffside, its stone shimmering faintly as though lit from within. Silver veins pulsed across its surface like liquid moonlight, forming symbols she recognized from the awakening chamber. A massive archway marked the entrance, guarded by 2 statues of wolves with eyes made of polished crystal. As the moon climbed higher, the wolves' eyes glowed softly, casting pale reflections across the ancient stone. Seraphine felt the pull again, a gentle tug deep inside her chest, as though something within the sanctum called her home. Aldrich's horse slowed beside hers. This place was built by your ancestors. The magic woven into its walls was meant to guide moonborn heirs in their awakening. Seraphine stared, awe and fear tangling inside her. "Why me?" she whispered. Aldrich looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "Because fate rarely chooses those who seek power. It chooses those strong enough to survive it." His words sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could respond, Vylara lifted her torch and signaled them forward. The sanctum's gates began to open. The gates opened with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through Seraphine's bones, as though the sanctum itself was awakening to greet them. Pale light spilled from the entrance, washing over her skin in a soft rush of warmth that chased away the chill of the valley air. As she stepped inside alongside Aldrich, the air grew still, almost reverent. The vast chamber beyond glowed with suspended orbs of moonlit energy that floated like stars trapped beneath stone. Runes spiraled across the floor, shifting gently as if alive. Seraphine felt drawn toward the center, where a raised pedestal stood carved from luminous white stone. "The heart of the sanctum," Vylara murmured. "Only those of moonborn blood can stand upon it." Seraphine hesitated, fear curling tight in her gut. Aldrich placed a steady hand on her back. "You are safe here," he said quietly. She took a breath, then stepped onto the pedestal. Instantly, a wave of brilliance rose around her, threading through her hair and fingertips. Visions flashed again, wolves bowing, moons aligning, a cradle of silver flame. When the light faded, Seraphine stood trembling, but unharmed. The sanctum had accepted her, and Aldrich's expression was a mixture of relief and awe. But before anyone could speak, a sudden crack split the air. A sound like stone fracturing under immense pressure. The glowing orbs flickered violently, their light sputtering as an icy wind knifed through the chamber. Thorn drew his blade instinctively. That came from outside. Vylara closed her eyes, sensing the disturbance. When she opened them again, fear sharpened her voice. "The wards have been breached." Aldrich's expression darkened. "Impossible. No one outside the Silver Fang or Moonborn bloodlines can cross them." But the ground trembled again, this time harder, dust drifting from the ceiling. The wolves at the entrance dimmed, their crystal eyes losing their glow. Seraphine felt the sanctum's warmth drain away from her skin, replaced by a cold so sharp it made her breath hitch. "Aldrich," she whispered. "Someone's coming." His gaze snapped to her, fierce and protective. "Stay behind me." The chamber doors buckled inward, stone grinding against stone. A shadow pooled at the threshold, spreading like spilled ink. And from within that darkness, a voice slithered through the air, one she recognized instantly. Garrick Emberholt had followed them, and he had brought something far worse than Hollowborn with him. The chamber shuddered as Garrick stepped through the fractured entrance, shadows curling around him like living serpents. His eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger that made Seraphine's breath catch in her throat. But he wasn't alone. Behind him slithered a creature unlike anything she had seen. Taller than a man, but shaped from twisting black mist laced with crimson veins that pulsed like a beating heart. Its form rippled and distorted with every movement, as though it was struggling to stay anchored in the physical world. Vailara's voice broke in a harsh whisper. A blood-bound shade. He used forbidden rites. Aldrich stepped forward, power coiling beneath his skin, silver eyes burning with fury. You dare bring corruption into sacred ground? Garrick laughed, the sound low and venomous. Sacred? This place is a tomb of forgotten ghosts. I bring only truth, and the power you're too weak to claim. His gaze snapped to Seraphine, lingering with disturbing greed. She shouldn't be here. Her lineage belongs to the strongest alpha willing to wield it. Seraphine's chest tightened as the shade hissed, its voice scraping like metal. She felt the sanctum's fading warmth flicker within her like a dying ember. Aldrich shifted protectively. You will not touch her. The shade surged forward, streaking across the floor in a blur of darkness. Aldrich thrust out an arm, summoning a barrier of shimmering silver force that crackled as the creature collided with it. The impact shook the chamber, and Seraphine stumbled backward as dust rained from the ceiling. Violara and Thorn leapt to flank Aldrich, blades drawn, eyes glowing with wolf-light. But Garrick remained still, watching her with unsettling delight, as if the chaos unfolding around them were merely background noise. You feel it, don't you? He called to Seraphine. The sanctum's magic fading. The ward's dying. You're not protected here anymore. His words were true. Seraphine felt the shift, like a thread inside her pulling taut, urging her to rouse something deep within her. But she didn't know how. Fear pressed against her ribs. She had only one burst of moonborn fire to her name, and she had no idea how she'd even summoned it. The shade slammed into Aldrich's barrier again, cracks spiderwebbing across the shimmering surface. Aldrich gritted his teeth, muscles tensing. Seraphine, he said sharply, listen to me. You must stay back. But the sanctum seemed to pulse around her, whispering something different. The pedestal she had stood upon before began to glow faintly, threads of silver light winding up its sides like awakening vines. Seraphine turned toward it, drawn again by the same pull she felt upon entering. Her heart pounded. The sanctum is calling me, she whispered. Valara snapped her gaze toward her. Seraphine, no, this is too dangerous. But as the shade slammed the barrier a third time, Aldrich staggered, the shimmering shield flickering dangerously. Seraphine took a step toward the pedestal, instinct urging her forward. Shockwaves rippled through the chamber with every strike the shade delivered, the floor quaking underfoot. Garrick smirked. Go on, little heir, answer it. Let it devour you. His voice slithered into her bones, cold and poisonous. But beneath his taunts, the sanctum's call grew stronger, warm, steady, familiar. She pressed her hand against the glowing stone, bracing herself as a surge of energy rushed through her arm. Silver light spiraled outward, weaving around her wrists like gentle chains. Her breath hitched. The pedestal's heartbeat matched her own, syncing perfectly. As power unfurled inside her like wings, she realized something terrifying and undeniable. The sanctum wasn't calling for her protection. It was calling for her awakening. The moment Seraphine surrendered to the pull of the sanctum, the pedestal erupted with a radiant surge of moonlit energy that swept across the chamber in a spiraling wave. The shade recoiled, shrieking as the light scorched its misty form. Garrick shielded his eyes, snarling as cracks of silver fire danced up the chamber walls. Aldrich staggered back from the barrier as it dissolved, replaced by a column of shimmering light rising from the pedestal. Seraphine hovered above it, suspended by threads of energy that wrapped around her arms, her waist, her legs, lifting her as though the sanctum itself was cradling its air. Her eyes glowed brilliant silver, reflecting the swirling currents of power awakening inside her. Vylara could only whisper, "Moon above." Aldrich reached toward her, tension tightening every line of his body. "Seraphine, stay with me." His voice broke through the roar of energy, grounding her. She clung to the sound of it, the only familiar anchor in a storm of ancient power. But the sanctum wasn't done. Light pulsed from the sigils carved into the walls, converging on Seraphine until the chamber blazed with blinding silver. The air tasted of lightning and memory. For the first time, Seraphine felt whole. Then everything changed. The swirling light condensed suddenly, shooting outward in a shockwave that hurled Aldrich, Vylara, and Thorn across the chamber. The shade disintegrated under the blast, its scream ripped from existence. Garrick, however, endured. He staggered but remained standing, his eyes wild with a mix of fury and awe. "She's becoming more than moonborn," he growled. "She's becoming a force." Seraphine collapsed onto the pedestal, trembling as the glow faded, leaving her breathless but alive. Aldrich scrambled to her side, ignoring the dust coating his clothes and the gash bleeding across his arm. "Seraphine," he breathed, hands steady despite the chaos. "Look at me." She lifted her head slowly, silver still flickering in her irises. I'm scared," she whispered. Aldrich cupped her face gently. "You did what no one else could. You saved us." But Garrick stepped forward, his voice low and venomous. "This is only the beginning. When her power fully blooms, she will reshape the Alpha line. And I will not let you claim her." Aldrich rose, positioning himself between Seraphine and the threat. "Over my dead body." Garrick smiled darkly. "That can be arranged." And the chamber plunged into silence. The ground quivered beneath Seraphine as Garrick advanced, his presence thickening the air like a spreading toxin. Aldrich stood firm in front of her, shoulders squared, muscles coiled with raw determination. Every breath Seraphine drew felt heavier, threaded with the fading echoes of her awakening. The sanctum's light had dimmed to a soft pulse beneath her palms, as though it had given all it could for now. Garrick's steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing with the arrogance of a wolf who believed victory already rested in his claws. "You cannot protect her forever, Stormborn," he said, voice dripping contempt. "She is power incarnate. Power does not hide behind trembling kings." Aldrich's lip curled in a snarl. "Then come test your strength, but do not expect to walk away." The two alphas locked eyes, the air between them thick with unspoken challenge. Vylara and Thorn struggled to rise from where the shockwave had thrown them, both bruised but determined. Seraphine pushed herself upright, though her limbs trembled violently. She hated feeling helpless while others fought for her. A painful truth slammed into her chest. This battle wasn't just for her safety. It was for her future, her freedom, and the fate of her awakening. Garrick lunged first, his body twisting into a half-shift that contorted muscle and bone with terrifying speed. Claws extended glowing with corrupted crimson energy. Aldrich met him head-on, their collision sending a blast of force rippling through the chamber. Stone cracked beneath their feet. Sparks erupted where their powers clashed, silver against crimson, purity against corruption. Seraphine stumbled backward, shielding her eyes as the alphas tore into each other with brutal precision. Aldrich fought like a storm, controlled, relentless, every strike fueled by purpose. Garrick fought like wildfire, unpredictable, vicious, determined to consume everything in his path. Vylara limped to Seraphine's side, panting. "We have to get you out of here. If the sanctum fully fails, the whole structure could collapse." But Seraphine shook her head. "No, I can't leave him." The words surprised even her, but they rang with undeniable truth. Vyalara's eyes softened with understanding and fear. then you must find a way to help. Because if Aldrich falls, nothing will stand between you and Garrick." Seraphine turned back to the pedestal, praying desperately that some remnant of its power remained, something she could call, something that might answer her trembling plea for strength. Her pulse hammered as she pressed both hands against the pedestal once more, forcing herself past the exhaustion that dragged at her bones. The stone was cold now, far colder than before, its glow flickering like a dying candle. "Please," she whispered, voice shaking. "I don't know what to do." A faint spark responded beneath her palms, weak but alive. Seraphine closed her eyes, reaching inward to the place where the silver fire had first ignited. She imagined it as a flame buried deep within her chest, a light she needed, a light she feared. The chamber shook violently as Aldrich slammed into a pillar, Garrick's claws tearing across his arm. Aldrich roared in pain, and something inside Seraphine snapped. Her fear sharpened into resolve. She drew a breath and pushed harder, channeling everything, her terror, her anger, her hope, into the pedestal. The runes flared for a heartbeat, then dimmed again. Not enough. "You must trust yourself," came a soft voice behind her. Seraphine spun to see a shimmering apparition emerging from the shadows. A woman with her same red hair, moonlit eyes, calm and ancient. Elowen Starcrest, her ancestor. "Your power is not the sanctum's," Elowen whispered. "It is yours. Claim it." Seraphine stared at the apparition, her breath catching as Elowen's presence washed over her like warm moonlight. The chamber's trembling faded into the background. Even Garrick's snarls and Aldrich's roars seemed distant. Elowen reached out, her translucent fingers hovering close to Seraphine's heart. "The sanctum can guide you," she said gently, "but it cannot awaken what you refuse to believe." Seraphine's throat tightened. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I don't know how to control any of this." Elowen's gaze softened, filled with a tenderness Seraphine had never known from her own mother. "Power is not born from fearlessness," she said. "It is born from choosing to rise despite fear." Behind her, Aldrich crashed to one knee, blood streaking his arm as Garrick advanced for a killing blow. Panic surged through Seraphine, but Elowen caught her chin, guiding her eyes back. "You are moonborn. Your fire answers only to you. Trust yourself, Seraphine." The apparition began to fade, her form dissolving into shimmering dust. "And remember, you were never broken. You were becoming." The words struck something deep inside Seraphine. Her trembling steadied. Her breath deepened. When she opened her eyes, silver fire glowed faintly in their depths, no longer wild, but waiting. A scream tore from Aldrich as Garrick slammed him into the shattered floor, claws raised for the final strike. Fear ignited something fierce inside Seraphine. She stepped down from the pedestal, silver light trailing behind her like smoke. Garrick didn't notice her at first, too focused on ending Aldrich, but when Seraphine's bare feet touched the runes, they burst alive again in a ring of luminescent fire. Garrick froze, turning slowly as the chamber flooded with a glow brighter than before. Seraphine lifted her hand, and silver flames curled around her fingers. Not chaotic, but controlled, bending to her will. Garrick snarled, "You don't even know how to wield that power." Seraphine's voice was steady, stronger than she felt. "I don't need to know everything. I just need to know enough to stop you." She thrust her hand forward. A torrent of moonlit fire erupted, engulfing Garrick and slamming him across the chamber with thunderous force. The walls shook, dust raining down. Aldrich stared, stunned, breathless. Seraphine lowered her, hand chest-heaving, the silver glow fading slowly from her skin. "No one," she whispered, "owns me." Garrick struggled to rise, but for the first time fear flickered in his eyes. The chamber shook violently as Garrick dragged himself to his feet, smoke rising from his scorched armor, his breaths ragged and uneven. The silver fire Seraphine had unleashed still shimmered faintly on the stone, casting ghostly reflections across the fractured walls. Aldrich pushed himself upright, wincing as he wiped blood from his jaw. His gaze locked on Seraphine, not with shock, but with something fiercer, deeper. Pride. "You saved my life," he breathed. Seraphine swallowed hard, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She wanted to speak, to say she hadn't done it alone, that she'd simply reacted, that fear had sharpened her instincts, but the moment shattered when Garrick let out a low, guttural growl. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped, voice trembling with rage. "I will tear this sanctum apart. I will tear you apart. Her power will be mine." Darkness writhed beneath his feet, coiling like living tar. Vylara staggered to Aldrich's side, gripping her blades despite her shaking hands. Thorn limped forward, bruised but determined. "He's drawing from the corruption again," Vylara warned. "If he finishes that shift, there will be no containing him." Seraphine's stomach knotted. She wasn't sure she had enough strength left for another attack. Aldrich stepped in front of her, his shoulders squared, every muscle poised to intercept Garrick's next strike. "Stay behind me," he commanded. But Seraphine shook her head, a spark of defiance rising through the exhaustion. "He's after me. You shouldn't take the blow meant for me." Aldrich turned just enough to meet her eyes, his voice low and unyielding. "I would take 1,000 for you." The words stunned her speechless. Garrick lunged, his body warping grotesquely as crimson corruption crawled up his arms and neck, twisting his bones into unnatural angles. The air thickened, filled with the stench of burning earth. His roar shook the chamber. Aldrich met him halfway, their collision a thunderous crash that sent cracks spiderwebbing across the floor. Vylara and Thorn darted in to flank Aldrich, attacking in synchronized arcs, but Garrick seemed fueled by something far beyond rage. He knocked Thorn aside with a single strike, sending him skidding across the ground. Vylara barely dodged a claw that would have torn her throat. Seraphine watched the fight unfold with mounting fear. The room was collapsing. The sanctum's light was dimming. If Garrick overpowered Aldrich here, everything would end. Seraphine's breath came faster as she backed toward the pedestal, her fingers brushing the remaining warmth etched into its runes. She needed strength, more than she possessed. The silver fire simmered faintly beneath her skin, but exhaustion dragged at her, limbs like chains. The vision of Alawan echoed in her mind. Power is not born from fearlessness. It is born from choosing to rise, despite fear. She pressed her hand to the stone. "Help me," she whispered. But the sanctum did not flare. It barely glowed. Too much corruption had seeped into its walls. The battle raged behind her, Aldrich's snarls, Garrick's roars, Vylara's sharp breaths. Seraphine squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't let them die for her. Slowly, she reached deeper inside herself, past the trembling, past the doubt, searching for the flicker of silver flame she had awakened before. Nothing came. Panic clawed up her throat. She struck the pedestal with her fist, tears burning her eyes. "Please," she begged. "I need more. I need—" And then she felt it. Not the sanctum's magic. Something else. Something vast and ancient, stirring inside her like a sleeping star beginning to wake. The ancient force stirred deeper, rising through Seraphine's veins with slow, deliberate power, nothing like the frantic burst she had felt before. This was steadier, heavier, like the earth itself answering her call. Her breath hitched as silver sparks drifted from her fingertips, swirling upward in soft spirals. The pedestal's runes responded weakly at first, flickering like fading embers, then flared with sudden brilliance as the new energy surged into them. Seraphine gasped, her back arching as moonlit fire flooded through her limbs, burning away her fear. She felt Eloan's presence again, not as a vision, but as memory carried in blood. You were not meant to mimic the Sanctum's power. You were born to complete it. The chamber brightened. Garrick stumbled mid-attack, shielding his eyes from the sudden radiance. Aldrich staggered backward, chest heaving, staring at Seraphine in disbelief. Vylara froze, whispering, "Moon above." The Sanctum's walls pulsed in response, ancient carvings igniting in cascading waves of silver light. Seraphine rose from the pedestal once more, not lifted this time, but stepping forward on her own feet, her aura blazing like a living constellation. Garrick hissed, his corruption recoiling. "What are you?" Seraphine met his gaze, her voice low and steady. "Awake!" Garrick roared and lunged just as the Sanctum erupted into full brilliance. Seraphine thrust her hand forward, and this time, the silver fire didn't burst outward in a wild torrent. It formed a precise beam, streaking across the chamber like a spear of moonlight. It struck Garrick square in the chest, piercing through the corruption wrapped around him. Crimson energy shattered like glass, exploding outward in jagged shards that evaporated into dust. Garrick screamed, collapsing to his knees as the last threads of corruption tore free from his skin. Seraphine didn't stop. She stepped closer, each stride steady, the floor lighting beneath her feet. Her power wrapped around Garrick, holding him in place as he writhed. "You sought to own me," she said, voice resonant with more than her own strength. "But you cannot own what was never yours to claim." With a final thrust of her palm, the silver fire engulfed him. Darkness recoiled from light. Garrick's scream faded into silence as his body dissolved into ash, scattered by the Sanctum's breath. When it was done, Seraphine swayed. Aldrich caught her before she could fall, pulling her against his chest. His voice trembled against her hair. "Seraphine, you just changed everything." The chamber fell into a deep, ringing silence once Garrick's ashes vanished into the fading glow. The Sanctum's light softened, no longer blazing with violent purpose, but settling into a warm, steady pulse that bathed the room in a gentle silver haze. Seraphine leaned into Aldrich's arms, her strength nearly spent. Every breath felt heavy, threaded with exhaustion and relief. Aldrich held her as though she were something precious and breakable, yet stronger than anyone had ever realized. "It's over," he murmured, though his voice trembled as if he hardly believed it. Seraphine lifted her gaze to the runes flickering across the walls, sensing the Sanctum's approval humming faintly around her. Vylara and Thorn approached slowly, their faces streaked with dust and blood, but both wore expressions of awe. "Garrick Emberholt is gone," Vylara said quietly. "You defeated a corrupted alpha. No one alive has ever—" Her voice broke, words swallowed by disbelief. Seraphine swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what she'd done settle into her bones. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt changed, stretched between fear and newfound strength. Aldrich brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his silver eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "Let's get you outside." They stepped beyond the Sanctum's doors, into air that smelled of pine and cold dusk. The valley lay calm beneath a sky painted in shades of lavender and silver. Seraphine drew a shaky breath, letting the wind cool her fevered skin. The journey here had been filled with terror and revelations she still struggled to grasp. But now, standing beneath the open sky, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Aldrich stayed close beside her, his presence grounding, steady. "The Sanctum strengthened you," he said, watching her carefully. "But strength isn't the same as peace." Seraphine nodded. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be now." Aldrich turned to face her fully. "You are the last of the Moonborn. The Sanctum recognized you. The power answered you. but you're still allowed to choose what your life becomes." His words were gentle, but beneath them lay an unspoken truth. Her destiny had shifted the moment she awakened. Vylara approached with Thorn, both bowing their heads respectfully. "The Pax must be informed," Vylara said. "Garrick's death will send ripples across the realm." Seraphine's chest tightened. She hadn't meant to start a war. She had simply survived. They began their descent from the sanctum as twilight deepened, painting the valley in shades of soft blue. Torches flickered in the distance where Silver Fang warriors had gathered, alerted by the earth-shaking battle. As Seraphine approached, whispers spread through the ranks like wildfire. "The Moonborn heir. She defeated the corrupted Alpha. She changed the sanctum's light." Their awe weighed on her shoulders, like a cloak she had never asked to wear. Aldrich placed a reassuring hand on her back, guiding her gently but firmly through the crowd. His touch steadied the swirling emotions inside her. When they reached the clearing, the warriors parted, forming a wide circle. Aldrich stepped forward, voice echoing with authority. "Tonight we witnessed the fall of Garrick Emberholt," he announced, "and the rise of a lineage long thought lost." All eyes turned to Seraphine. Her pulse thundered. She wanted to shrink away, but something in her spine straightened. She met their stares, refusing to look away. The murmurs quieted. Vylara stepped beside Aldrich. "The realm will need leadership," she said, "and the Moonborn heir cannot walk her path alone." Aldrich nodded solemnly, then turned to Seraphine as though bracing for his own fate. Aldrich took a step toward Seraphine, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen. The torches around them flickered, casting golden shadows across his face. "Seraphine," he began, voice steady but softened by emotion, "you have faced more in days than most face in a lifetime. You've carried truth, survived betrayal, awakened a power older than the realm itself." His gaze held hers, unflinching. "But you do not have to face what comes next alone. If you choose it, I will stand beside you, as your protector, your ally, whatever you need." The circle of warriors watched in breathless silence. Seraphine felt her heart twist, overwhelmed by the tenderness in his voice. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. "You've already risked your life for me." Aldrich shook his head. "I don't offer this out of duty." His eyes softened, silver brightening like starlight. "I offer it because somewhere in the chaos, you became someone I cannot imagine this world without." The words hit her harder than any spell or strike. Tears stung her eyes, not of fear or pain, but something warm, startling, and fragile. "Aldrich," she breathed, voice trembling, "I don't want to face it alone either." A murmur rose through the warriors as Aldrich reached out, taking Seraphine's hand with quiet reverence. The contact sent a gentle pulse of warmth through her. Not magic this time, something human, steady, and grounding. "Then we face whatever comes next together," he said. Seraphine squeezed his hand, a shy, determined smile tugging at her lips. "Together." The valley seemed to exhale around them as the moon lifted higher, bathing the clearing in silver light. Vylara stepped forward and bowed deeply. "The Silver Fang Dominion recognizes Seraphine Rowanfall as the rightful heir of the Moonborn line, and we stand ready to protect her." The warriors followed, pounding their fists to their chests in a unified roar that echoed through the mountains. Seraphine's breath caught. For so long, she had been unwanted, discarded, sold like something broken. Yet here, surrounded by warriors, by those who had nearly died to protect her, she felt a belonging she had never known. Aldrich lifted her hand to his lips, brushing it with a promise more powerful than any vow. "Your life begins now," he whispered. And as the moonlight embraced her, Seraphine knew he was right. She was no longer the girl who had been sold. She was the heir who chose her own destiny. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment that hit you the hardest? Was it when Seraphine awakened her power? When Aldrich vowed to stand beside her? Or when she finally claimed the destiny she was told she'd never have? Drop your thoughts below. Tell me your favorite scene, your favorite character, or even the lesson this story left with you. I read every single comment, and your reactions help bring these stories to life. And if you want more emotional cinematic stories like this, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join me for the next chapter of our storytelling journey. Your support means everything. Until next time, keep your hearts brave and your imaginations wild.